Hey, how you doing? Wanted to tell you about something that I created a club. If you want to join, it's called Chess Cruncher Club, and so you're more than welcome to join. It's open to everyone. Okay, so let's dive into a game. I think did he already play this one? Just want to make sure. Just hold on. Okay, perfect. It is another one. Okay, this is an earlier one with Jeremy Silman versus the gentleman who did a French defense book. So that should be fun. Okay, Doki. All right, let's see what we got here. Seven. Is it the San? Oh, it's Los Angeles. Okay. Jeremy Silman's white again. So we get to take a look at how he handles the position. So D4, knight f6, c4. It's kind of a it's like an English. Now we've entered a kid. King's Indian defense. This is a kid for sure. A4. Now we've entered into a perk, I believe. This is very similar to a perk. So we've switched from a King's Indian to a perk defense. So this is just changing by each move. So castles for black. That's the interesting thing about the King's Indian kind of slash perk is that Yazir Sarawan actually played this. This when he was starting out as a chess player, he played the kid. He called it the Fortress. He talked about it on one of the St. Louis Chess Club YouTube presentations. Because what would happen is when he first started out, he would get checkmated early in the game when he was beginning as a chess player. So he tried to find an opening that would allow him to continue, further into the game without getting checkmated. And he did this. He says he didn't even know that he was playing and what opening he was playing. It was the King's Indian. But he called it to himself the Fortress. And so if you notice, this is very similar to a fortress, but this now has accelerated into a dragon, accelerated dragon. So this is kind of like a dragon, how the head comes up. Here's the head, the body, and the swivels. So it's just changed form so dramatically. This type of an opening. So just a little history on that, fun history. If you want to go watch it, you can. It's on St. Louis. It's always fun. I like watching Yazir Sarawan's teaching. He's a wonderful teacher. Okay, knight g5, h6. So is Maurice Ashley. So I like his DVDs for chess base. Those are always cool. e5. Yeah. So just what? That's always fun to go to St. Louis Chess Club and view those. Knight bd7. Wait a second. What did I do? D5. Okay. Locking. This is kind of this move is one of the standard lines. The interesting thing about it is it's kind of you have already solidified your idea. So now we have a locked in center. So until there is an idea that black does play. Black will try to play here, but he can't because of the pin. And he wants to play this move here. He wants to play his knight here and the pawn up here. This is for his king side. Because if y'all notice that when we're talking, we even talk about in Reassess Your Chess, that wherever your pawns are pointing is where you'll have more space. And at the present moment, black's pawns are all pointing towards the king side. So that means that he's going to want to try to play on that side of the board. And so that's kind of the idea that black's going to play for. But at the present moment, he can't move his knight. But he wants to move his knight and go f5. So h6. Oops. Ay, ay, ay. Yay. That's not the right move. I appreciate your patience on that. Wow. It's e3. Jeremy Silman's trying to fortify. We have to redo it. That is a playable line, the playable line of bishop here. But after this move, I'll show you why it's kind of not the best now that I looked at it. This here allows for your bishop's not placed on the optimum diagonal that you want. And then the knight could potentially, can't do it yet, but you could actually get stormed with this, and then he gains more, your opponent gains more space on the king side. So it's like, did I really accomplish much? And now they're going to get f5 in anyways, and so it's like, yeah, So Jeremy Silman wants to keep his position flexible, and potentially he can get, this is called the 4-pawn phalanx. I don't think I'm pronouncing it right. It was a spear unit that the Greeks used. It's phalanx. I'm just not pronouncing it right, but that's just what they're calling it. It's a King's Indian, that one. But this is, if you can get that in, and you can keep your center, that you've just squeezed everything. Because if you can get pawns like this, it's just amazing how much territory you have, and it actually prevents that move, e5, which is what black wants to play. So that's why black plays it right away. Because if black plays something else, let's say knight here, white's going to want to get f4 in, and now this is almost impossible to kind of go up against. I'm sure you can have that, and the queens come off the board, rooks come off the board, rook, and then it takes, and we have to take with the knight because we got to keep contact with this pawn. But like that could come out, you'd come there, and then the knight would come back, that would come out, the knight came back, then you have knight in, and this is just too strong for white, way too strong. So that's why he didn't even go down that and went e5, just to stop the four pawn push. And so it's just like, no, we don't want to do that. So here, knight d b7, and then queen to d2. This is a very critical move for white to play. Has a two principal idea. One is you are threatening to win a pawn at h6. Two is you are preparing to castle queenside, because black's going to try to storm the king side in this line. He's going to try to play knight here. Oh, not knight there. Knight. Stop that. He's going to try to play knight here and then f5. But if the king's on the queen side, then that kind of play doesn't really affect him as much. So that's why Jeremy Silman went queen d2. Knight c5, and then f3 to fortify everything. This is like the fortify is fortified, because he doesn't have enough to defend this pawn. But again, the threat is that and castle. So he's going to have to deal with it. a5. Wow, bishop d1. That's different, to say the least. What is the idea behind bishop d1? I hope I'm putting that in right. Yes, move 11, bishop d1. Let's try to figure out. I'm thinking it's so that the knight could actually come to a4. The knight a4 move is interesting because then that puts attack. So let's just say like bishop comes out here, knight a4. Okay, so he can't do knight a4 at that point. Maybe knight b5, bishop takes b5, pawn takes b5, then pushing. You play bishop takes, pawn takes. Then you have queen. And I don't think there's a way to hold this pawn, so he's going to have to basically give it up. And you're just going to have to hold that. I know that bishop right now is entombed, but all the pawns are on light squares. Same thing with black, so it's not like black is any better as well. So okay, so let's see what actually happens. c6, trying to as I like to say, hack away at the center. There's no reason to take because you can actually play here, and then if takes, you just take back, and the center again is locked up. So no reason to take. Ah, they did take. Okay, so he takes, and then b6. Castle. So white is deciding to castle because with this open file, the C file, it's not really good to castle queenside with that. So it's just castles kingside. h5. This rids forever the weakness of h6, so that's off the tables for sure. And now we have to find out. Now, after some typical kid moves that I've used millions of times before, a plan needs to be created at this point, he says, as is so often the case. No calculation is necessary at this time, though, so we don't have to calculate at this time. Though you do have to calculate before you play every move to ensure that your artistic design holds up to the cold truth of tactics. So there's a kind of catch-22 here that you don't really have to calculate, but you do have to make sure that the artistic idea that you're wanting to go down is playable. You don't want to play a move that it looks beautiful, but in the end turns out to be a Sour Patch Kid, as I like to say. So, plan is to grab b5. So the plan is to grab b5 with the knight, with two hands. Then chase away his best piece, the knight, on c5 by b4, by like preparing b3, a3, and then b4. Then infiltrate down the c file due to white's obvious advantages in space and on the queen side. This should prove to be decisive. So the idea is white wants to acquire b5, wants to get b5, wants to get a3, b4, b3, and then play at the right moment b4. But he wants to control that, then he wants to control these pawn moves here, and then he wants to potentially get a rook down on c1 to infiltrate down the C file. So these are his plans. And if you have a plan like that, you have to do one thing that he says. These are kind of like the grand plans. Is to make sure that you've calculated every type of tactical sacrifice, because potentially if you move the knight, this pawn here ends up becoming weak, a potential sacrificial spot. And black also has in the works the ability of c5, or f5 I mean, which would then storm the king side. So you have to always take in consideration your opponent's plans as well. You don't have to calculate. Just make sure if you know the position setups for the King's Indian in certain move orders, you'll be able to know if the grand old plan actually works or not. So we'll continue on. The first stage has been acquired, knight b5, knight e8. To get this move in, kaboom, that's the idea. Knight e to c. This basically cements the knight in its fortress. a4. He's going to try to break down white's side. Bishop c2. This connects the rooks for one purpose. If this were to be played here, what you could actually do is play b4 at this point. This would chase away the knight. And that's his most active piece. So you just got to be on task for that. So for bishop a6, this is attacking the knight, trying to basically it's paying it to the rook. So b4 here. Black is strategically lost at this point. He's strategically, because we have actually acquired a tremendous goal. What did we want to do? We back here. We wanted this sequence. We wanted to get a knight to b5, and then at the right moment kick the most active piece out. And we have acquired that by playing these moves here. And now he's positionally lost, because even if he takes in passing, we're going to take a takes b, which then would have infiltration down the a file, and a potential b3 to b4, which is our plan as well, to neutralize the knight's effectiveness on c5, and it would actually then make our position severely stronger. Really cement everything. A takes b. A takes b. That's right. We're going along with the plan. Knight c7 to attack the knight. Knight takes c7, which this attacks the rook. So queen is forced to take. Queen takes here. Of course, you see if this is played, then that happens. And the knight is now protected by the rook, and this bishop is almost trapped. I think it is trapped, if I'm close to being trapped, because now you can play bishop takes c5, and you can't. It's the knight's overloaded, and after this moves, kaboom, you've dropped a whole piece. That's why the queen has to take. So you can't do this idea of winning the f1 rook. f1 to c. Now we've acquired, we had our idea of a knight getting a pawn to b3 to b4, and then we also talked about the infiltration along the c file. So everything has been acquired by Jeremy Silman. Next idea is basically b4 and then potentially b5. And then it's like, spaghetti-o, as I like to say. Rook f, c1, or c8. And then b4, say goodbye to the nice knight. Knight to e6. This is an interesting tactical nuance here. Realizing that he would be toast after knight d7, bishop a4, he after knight excuse me, after knight d7, bishop a4, and the positional idea is dropping a bishop into c6, and this is just crushing, too powerful, way too powerful, and it's just not fun at all. And so that's why he plays knight e6. He gives this a try, hoping that the tactics might confuse his opponent. However, this merely speeds up the end. Now we leave our plan behind and enter a world of pure thought and simple calculation. So now that we've entered our idea, and basically our plan was that instead of our opponent going here, our plan was we wanted him to go there. Then we wouldn't have had to calculate. We still would have had the grand old plan going. But now that we have our opponent playing tactical, now we got to do a little bit of calculation, find out if this is right. And so Jeremy Silverman takes a little bit of time and decides to play knight takes d, queen takes knight, proper correct play, queen takes queen, rook takes, and then bishop d7, d2 to attack the rook, rook c, c8, and then you take the pawn with check. And of course, he has to play this move. Of course, you see, if taking here, this actually would potentially drop a rook. And you get to see, you kind of could see how. I'm going to let you, for a second, if you wanted to, stop and see how this actually drops a rook. Okay, if you're joining us, how this drops a rook is if, let's say, we just play king e7. First of all, you take the bishop. This is a tactical setup. You would take here. Oh, maybe it doesn't work out. Ooh, hold on, let me see. Okay, my bad. I appreciate your patience on that. It's actually rook takes here, and then after rook takes, you just win a bishop. That I had it in reverse. I had I had to get the move order correct. So after this, you take here, rook takes, and then a bishop drops. So it's like very bad position. So that's why the knight just decides. I mean, the king just decides to go over to f8, and potentially black's position is just so overloaded with weaknesses that they're just going to fall apart at this point. Bishop b3. This holds now. This holds onto the pawn and threatens the rook. So the rook's gonna, the bishop goes to b7 here. And then rook takes a8. And at this point, his opponent resigned here. Let me see if we can do another one. Yeah, we'll do another one. Let me see. We'll do another game after this, but I have to put in the notation that it's lost for black. Okay, there's two. The only way to handle it would be rook takes a8. That's the only way to basically handle it. The idea now is bishop to probably, I'm going to say, I don't think bishop e yet. I'm going to say we play, well, no, I don't even like b5. No, I don't like b5. I'm liking rook c7. That's a good move. There's this line here that would hold basically everything together, but then you get a surprise your life, and it's rook c6. And there's now nothing that you can do to not avoid losing. I guess you could try this here, but then you just implant the bishop there. If you tried this, you can actually, this is protected by the bishop, so that would be a very bad move there, so we don't want to do that. We'll say here, we'll retreat the bishop back now. We'll have everything supported. We'll say a pin. We'll do king to f2. Well, we can't check, so let's say he tries there. We just pick up one pawn. Or we could play, because that pawn's really no threat. We could just play this pawn here. Take that pawn. I think taking b6 is best, because now you're threatening b to c, b6 to b8 rook, which is a pin. So the king would have to potentially come up. You could actually play that now. If there, you play here. The rook would take. So that's probably not the best. b5 probably isn't the best move at this point. Maybe attacking there. Then potentially I think that's best. And then now he's got a trade. And with that trade, it's game, set, match. I know we just played out a move, but I had to think through this. Okay. Okay, we'll put it in one more game. Okay. Okay. Let's pull up another. Oops. Let's pull up another one. make sure I have that right for everything. Yep. Alright. Let's do it. E4, E6, knight C3, D5. This is a French, D4, C6. Now we've entered a Slav defense. E takes D5. Queen to... what am I missing here? I appreciate your patience on this. E6. Oh, C takes. Oh, that's why. For some reason I saw E4. E6, knight, okay, English. I should have realized that they wouldn't walk into that. And then takes, there we go. Now we're, oops. Yeah, that gets the bishop out. Bishop D6, knight F3, knight E6, or E7, bishop G5, F6, bishop has acquired a huge thing, bishop H4, and then bishop F5, queen E2, castles by black, bishop G3 to attack, bishop E4, not E6, bishop E4, E3, bishop takes, G takes, and F5. Bishop takes D. Of course, queen takes. But there's a line that we need to look at. Bishop E5. Bishop takes E5, pawn takes E5. F4. E takes F. Intriguing me, he says. This intrigued me on this type of a position. He said he was basically tantalized with the idea of this odd pawn structure that's holding, surprisingly. Though many positions call, F4 here. F4. Though many positions call for a quick setup of moves, this isn't one of them. The basic details are easy to map out. Black only has two pawns, C6 to C5 breaks, two pawn breaks. Dynamic moves, D4 to D5. No, C4 to C. Okay, and then okay. This is the idea for black. Oops. Here, these are the two breaks. However, let me see, which wouldn't be happening anytime soon. but remain a very real possibility down the line a bit. That's what he's saying, down the line a bit. So that which would be happening, wouldn't happen anytime soon, but remains a very possibility down the line a bit. Black can also preface that c5 is an idea, and then b6 to c5 is an idea, so that capturing would be b takes c. So b6 and then c5 could be played. Pawn advances for black are a5, a4, a3, and the advanced then advance the b pawn b7 to b5, leaving the c5 and c6 weak. This might not matter, or it might have profound long-term static ramifications. White's breaks are b3 to b2 to b4, and then b5. Majority or minority attack, which I don't see happening in this exact position. f3 to f2 to f3, and then e3 to e4, which leads to all sorts of potential chaotic positions. Pawn weaknesses, of course. f2 to f3 without e3 to e4 is very important. You have to get that in. Though it weakens e3, it also deprives black's knight of e4. So this move here deprives the knight of e4. Other factors, white has the half-open g-file. That's what white has, and can try to take possibility by using the Harry to come up the board and break open the center, like h4, h3, h5, and then h6, just to tear open the position. One other key question is where to put white's king. That's another thing. All of this zipped through my mind quickly as a resulting of training and retaining patterns from millions of games and structures. But in this case, it doesn't give me a clear answer. It seemed simple, but it's actually very tough position. And in a real game situation, I would sit there and stare for ages, he says, balancing all the considerations and trying to format a logical continuation and / plan. Again, if you aren't armed with these elemental details, then it's important to play the position with basically the engine, if you want to find out if it's a good move or not. If I was sitting at the board actually playing this position, other ideas would be happening in his mind. Basically, he would go through all of his games and rack his brain to find a pattern that's very similar to this. If black goes for the queenside pawns with a4, b5, then a3, followed by knight c3, a2, and b4 hits c6 and d5, and prepares potentially for knight. So what he's trying to say here is, this is the idea. If black tries this move here, if black tries these two moves, that's an idea. And then what he's going to do is try to get his knight in to c4, and then just hamper white's potential control. Actually, wait a second. Hold on, I think I have these soldiers wrong. a4, oops, a4, a4 would be the move, knight c3 to a2, and then into b4. So it'd be that move and that move. And then you could also potentially bring it to d, and then in here. You can bring it in, and then can stop a lot of c5 potential moves. That's what he was talking about. Gotcha. This isn't necessarily bad for black, but it's something that he has to take in consideration. If black plays a5 and b5, I can respond with a2 to a4. And then if he plays b4 to attack the knight, I can then play knight e2. So what he's talking about is if pawn a4, a5, sorry, I appreciate your patience, a7 to a5, b7 to b5, and then if we play a4 as white could potentially do, then black would play b5 or b4, and it would attack our knight, then we'd have to retreat our knight to e2 to bring the knight to d3. So d3 to b, alright, yeah, let's see. To bring the knight to d3 or b3. And the rook on to this open c file would be good, or half open c file, so I could play against the weakness of c6. That's what he says. If white pushes his h pawn down the board, black will let it go to h6 and leave a hole on g6. White must be able to utilize it and also make a defensive plan to protect f5. Then f5 is hard to break at. It'd be just hard. Okay, these are kind of the ideas. I know this is a long-ended description, but we're just going over the position that we're looking at. And then close up the G file, and then all this on the king side. So if this pawn's able to run up the board, we'll say here, all the way up the board. Black wants to play this, but then we have this type of positional setup here, and it kind of wrecks a little bit of the happiness of black's position. Black is likely to try to push his a pawn all the way to a3. If black's pawns if black could get his pawn to a4 or b5 with a pawn on a3, he will likely swing his knight into c4. So the idea is black wants to get a knight to c4. Black might wish to leave the pawn on b7 when there isn't any serious weakness in black's camp at that point. Okay. This is black's camp. e5 and placing a bit of pressure with f5. So this is kind of really interesting, a lot of it. In this case, it's hard for white to find an actual plan here. On the other hand, black can get active if he loosens his own position up a little bit. So what he has to do is, black's kind of cramped right now. We'll just do a little quick talk because this is overwhelming me a little bit. All these ideas though that are being thrown out here, like, whoa, hello. Now this is what grandmasters, when they get into these tough pickles, this is why they take some time to calculate. They're looking at all these different variations, but sometimes the move's just straight in your face, and so sometimes they take a little too much time on the most simplest move. Happens to us all. But in this type of complexity, it would be good to spend probably maybe 15 to 20 minutes just considering your opponent and your plan. Okay. Okay, white trades black, takes, so if white can get f3, e4 in, then takes, and all that would happen and smash through then g6. This type of position is playable. And then black would try to get a knight into e4. Again, I didn't do any actual calculation. Instead, I explored various pawn and piece configurations in an effort to deem what ones were most dangerous for both sides. It seems that black had a slight easier time leading the dance, though I considered things to be more or less equal here. Any would anything could happen, and anything could happen in this game. That's what he's saying. Here's a hypothetical series of moves that would likely be in play. So knight d7. This is hypothetical land. When white would be a bit pushed, so I'd push. So you'd push h4, a5, knight f3, knight h5, knight f6, f3. Actually stopping. That's a tongue tie there. Stopping any infiltrations. a4, bishop d3, and I would follow up with rook c1, king f2, and it's just a game that offers mutual chances at this point. So we'll stop here before we pick up. The next is 2 questions on planning. We're going to be talking about 2 questions on planning next time. Okay, that was a pretty big section, to say the least. Yeah, it's perfect to stop here. I want to do I have to get a sip, and then we'll do a little quick summary wrap up. Okay, what did we learn from this? We learned that you really don't have to calculate. You can look at pawn structures and say which pawn structure is good for me, which pawn structure is good for my opponent. When you calculating is your opponent moves there, you move here, your opponent moves there, you move here, your opponent moves there, you move here. That's calculation. Planning is this pawn structure is equal. You can say if I play this pawn here, this pawn here, this pawn, my opponent plays these pawns. It's kind of like calculated, but not really. And you get to see what pawn structures you want and what pawn structures your opponents want. And if it turns out that that pawn structure is good for you, you're going to go down that pawn chain. So just remember, calculation has its potential necessity. Like if you're doing a grand old plan, you want to make sure that you don't get tactically smashed or taken advantage of, or all that. And so, and if you're going to set up a tactic, of course you want to make sure it's calculated properly. But if you don't have to calculate, don't calculate. Just look at pawn structures, look at the imbalances, look at what your opponent has. Like black has 2 knights versus white has a knight and a bishop. So of course we go back to our reassess your chess knight model, which is anti-knight model, which is depriving the knights of all their optimized squares or outposts. And of course f3 deprives the knight of e4 and g4, and then the knight on e7 really doesn't have a good spot to go to. So that's kind of the idea that we'd be looking at. We look at ideas, not calculation. Okay, I appreciate your time with me on this, and that you helped out a little bit. And so this is a great learning experience about not calculating but planning through pawn structures and the imbalances. That's why you have to remember that the grand old plan of eternity is to receive the Lord Jesus, Lord and Savior of your life. And it's vital because during these times that we live in, no person is guaranteed tomorrow. And so you always got to think about that. We talked about how long eternity was and how long we can't even imagine how long forever is. Okay, And that's those are words sometimes we use in our speech and we don't even understand them. We talked about water draining all the oceans and seas in the thimble. It hasn't even begun. Taking an eyedropper, taking all the sands off of every beach and stacking it inland would still it wouldn't begin. That's how long it is, and we can't even comprehend that. So just think about it, okay? I appreciate your patience on that again. Listening and considering. Remember what Bruce Lee said: take what you know, be able to apply it, be willing to do something with it. Remember, treasure your victories, learn from your losses. Remember that mistakes don't define who you are. It's how you handle a mistake that defines who you are in any profession that you're in. And also, remember what our model is as a chest cruncher, team chest cruncher. We hang up our coats, we hang up our hats, we sit down and study when most won't. Team chest cruncher does. That makes all the difference. And as Wesley So says to the Lord Jesus, as I say, God bless. And I'll see you next time on Chest Cruncher TV. Also, remember what Hannibal Smith said. Even inside a random position, there's always a plan. And when you find it, you get to say, I love it when a plan comes together. Also, remember, like we talked about in the beginning, if you want to join Chess Cruncher Club, you're more than welcome. It's on chess.com, and it's open to everyone who wants to do it. And if we get enough members, then we can start playing some tournaments, which will be fun. So join if you'd like, and we can build up enough membership for that. Okay, be blessed, Team Chess Cruncher. I will see you tomorrow. Bye-bye. Go Team Chess Cruncher. Hoorah.